someone who may have the lexicon could begin, or I'll do it.
I have the lexicon.
Okay. Could you do it?
Okay.
What is fate? We must know what Sri Aurobindo tells us is fate, because he capitalizes the F in this stand up unsolved behind fate's starting line. Okay, begin.
Okay. The Indian explanation of fate is karma. We ourselves are our own fate through our actions, but the fate created by us binds us. For what we have sown, we must reap in this life or another. Still, we are creating our fate for the future, even while undergoing old fate from the past in the present. That gives a meaning to our will and action, and does not, as European critics wrongly believe, constitute a rigid and sterilizing fatalism. But again, our will and action can often annul or modify even the past karma. It is only certain strong effects called utkata karma that are non-modifiable. Here too, the achievement of the spiritual consciousness and life is supposed to annul or give the power to annul karma. For we enter into union with the will divine, cosmic or transcendent, which can annul what it had sanctioned for certain conditions, new create what it had created. The narrow fixed lines disappear. There is a more plastic freedom and wideness. Neither karma nor astrology, therefore, points to a rigid and forever immutable fate. From Letters on Yoga. Fate is God's foreknowledge outside space and time of all that in space and time shall yet happen. What he has foreseen, power and necessity work out by the conflict of forces. From Essays Divine and Human. This is the great truth now dawning on the world, that will is the thing which moves the world, and that fate is merely a process by which will fulfills itself. From Essays in Philosophy and Yoga.
So wonderful, wonderful explanations of fate by Sri Aurobindo. The next line we come across is an aspiration in the night's profound. The night here is capitalized, and we know what it is. Profound, I think we all know profound. Seed of a perishing body and half-lit mind. Uplifts its lonely tongue of conscious fire towards an undying light forever lost. And there is so much of great power and beauty in this word light, which Sri Aurobindo again capitalizes. So, Nilisha, could you read light?
Yes. Light is primarily a spiritual manifestation of the divine reality, illuminative and creative. Material light is a subsequent representation or conversion of it into matter for the purposes of the material energy, the life divine.
This is so important here, so very important from Sri Aurobindo, that the light is primarily and first of all a spiritual manifestation of this divine reality. It is illuminative and creative. The light is creative also. But material light is simply a subsequent representation or conversion of this light into matter. And why? For the purpose of the material energy. Now, this is the next one is a bit long and so very beautiful.
Our sense, by its incapacity, has invented darkness. In truth, there is nothing but light. Only it is a power of light either above or below our poor human vision's limited range. For do not imagine that light is created by the suns. The suns are only physical concentrations of light. But the splendor they concentrate for us is self-born and everywhere. God is everywhere, and wherever God is, there is light, the hour of God. Light is a general term. Light is not knowledge, but the illumination that comes from above and liberates the being from obscurity and darkness. The mother. The mother. The light is everywhere. The force is everywhere. And the world is so small. Words of the mother.
This was written by Mother to my dear friend, Dimitri von Morenschild, and he shared this with me. I have it just in back of my desk to always remember that the light is everywhere, the force is everywhere, and the world is so small. So we continue on with these lines from Savitri that we have to go back to an aspiration in the night's profound, seed of a perishing body and half-lit mind. What does it do? It uplifts its lonely tongue of conscious fire towards an undying light, forever lost. Only it hears, sole echo of its call, the dim reply in man's unknowing heart, and meets, not understanding why it came, or for what reason is the suffering here, God's sanction to the paradox of life and the riddle of the immortal's birth in time. Now we know that a paradox is a statement or a thing that seems self-contradictory or absurd, in fact. But actually, in reality, it expresses a possible truth. So we don't understand this in our unknowing heart, why there is suffering here and what is God's sanction to this paradox of life, and even the riddle of the immortal's birth in time. Now, time is very important here because we will find it so many times recurring again and again in Savitri. And Nilisha, if you could once again read time for us. There's not so much there, but it's very, very important. I have it as around 332, but yours will be different. But we find Sri Aurobindo speaking of time in the Life Divine, the synthesis of yoga, the letters on yoga, even the essays on the Gita. And
there's a lot on time.
yeah, there's a good bit, but we don't need to do the dictionary definition when we have Sri Aurobindo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Time and space are the conceptual movement and extension of the Godhead in us. Essays on the Gita. Time and space are not limited. They are infinite. They are the terms of an extension of consciousness in which things take place or are arranged in a certain relation, succession, order. There are again different orders of time and space. That too depends on the consciousness. The eternal is extended in time and space, but he is also beyond all time and space. Timelessness and time are two terms of the eternal existence. The spaceless eternal is not one indivisible infinite of space. There is in it no near or far, no here or there. The timeless eternal is not measurable by years or hours or aeons. The experience of it has been described as the eternal moment. But for the mind, this state cannot be described except by negatives. One has to go beyond and to realize it. Letters on Yoga. Time is a field of circumstances and forces meeting and working out a resultant progression whose course it measures. To the ego, it is a tyrant or a resistance. To the divine, an instrument. Therefore, while our effort is personal, time appears as a resistance, for it presents to us all the obstruction of the forces that conflict with our own. When the divine working and the personal are combined in our consciousness, it appears as a medium and a condition. When the two become one, it appears as a servant and instrument. The synthesis of yoga. Time is a manifestation of the eternal, the life divine. Time presents itself to human effort as an enemy or a friend, as a resistance, a medium, or an instrument. But always it is really the instrument of the soul, the synthesis of yoga.
So we have a much better understanding of time now. And to our present consciousness, it seems to be an obstruction at times, even a tyrant or a resistance. But that's only to the ego, because to the divine, what is time? And so we have to go beyond mental understanding to realize what time really is. The next line in Savitri is very, very important. The next 3 lines. Along a path of eons serpentine, in the coiled blackness of her nescient course, the earth goddess toils across the sands of time. So this serpentine, this winding or twisting course of eons, not just one life, it's a path of eons. And in the coiled blackness of her nescient course, well, nescience, Sri Aurobindo tells us, is the absence of knowledge or awareness. It is ignorance. And he says nescience in nature is the complete self-ignorance. Now, the earth goddess toils across the sands of time. Sri Aurobindo tells us in the Life Divine that the faith in the divine Shakti must be always at the back of our strength. And when she becomes manifest, it must be or grow implicit and complete. There is nothing that is impossible to her, who is the conscious power and universal goddess, all creative from eternity and armed with the Spirit's omnipotence. So powerful. So this earth goddess who is toiling across the sands of time, there is a being in her whom she hopes to know. A word speaks to her heart she cannot hear. A fate compels whose form she cannot see. Now, Sri Aurobindo says, in her unconscious orbit through the void, out of her mindless depths, she strives to rise. A perilous life her gain, a struggling joy, a thought that can conceive but hardly knows, arises slowly in her and creates the idea, the speech that labels more than it lights, a trembling gladness that is less than bliss, invades from all this beauty that must die. And we have many, many words here, but we have to look first of all at the key things. This idea of the void, that this being that is in her, and this word that speaks to her, and this fate that compels her and she cannot see its form, now in her unconscious orbit through the void. And Nilisha, could you again give us the Sri Aurobindo's definition of the void? So important here, this void, because it is not really a void. Okay.
The absolute cannot indeed be bound in its nature to manifest a cosmos of relations, but neither can it be bound not to manifest any cosmos. It is not itself a sheer emptiness, for a vacant absolute is no absolute. Our conception of a void or zero is only a conceptual sign of our mental inability to know or grasp it. It bears in itself some ineffable essentiality of all that is and all that can be. And since it holds in itself this essentiality and this possibility, it must also hold in itself, in some way of its absoluteness, either the permanent truth or the inherent, even if latent, realizable actuality of all that is fundamental to our or the world's existence. The Life Divine. The void is the condition of the self, free, wide, and silent. It seems void to the mind, but in reality, it is simply a state of pure existence and consciousness. Sat and Chit with Shanti. Letters on Yoga. By void is meant emptiness clear of all contents except existence, pure and simple. Without that, one cannot realize the silent Brahman. Letters on Yoga.
So out of her mindless depths, she strives to rise. But her life is a perilous gain. A perilous life her gain, a struggling joy, a thought that can conceive but hardly knows. Arises slowly in her and creates the idea, the speech that labels more than it lights, a trembling gladness that is less than bliss, invades from all this beauty that must die. And now I have to go to you once again, Nilisha, on thought, because Sri Aurobindo speaks so beautifully and quite lengthily on thought.
It's quite long, though.
Yeah, we'll do only some of it today, but we have enough time to do some, so you can do 4 or 5.
All right. Thought in itself, in its origin on the higher levels of consciousness, is a perception, a cognitive seizing of the object or of some truth of things which is a powerful but still a minor and secondary result of spiritual vision. A comparatively external and superficial regard of the self upon the self, the subject upon itself, or something of itself as object, the life divine.
So we see here that thought in itself, it begins in itself, in its origin on the higher levels of consciousness, is a perception. It's a direct perception, a cognitive seizing of the object or of some truth of things, which is a powerful but still a minor and secondary result of spiritual vision, because spiritual vision catches it immediately. And thought on its highest levels is definitely a perception or a cognitive seizing of the object. It's very powerful, but it's still secondary to spiritual vision. A couple more, Nilisha, please.
A thought is an arrow shot at the truth. It can hit a point, but not cover the whole target. But the archer is too well satisfied with his success to ask anything farther. Essays Divine and Human. All living thought is a world in preparation. All real act is a thought manifested. Essays in Philosophy and Yoga.
One more, please.
Thought is not essential to existence, nor its cause, but it is an instrument for becoming. I become what I see in myself. All that thought suggests to me, I can do. All that thought reveals in me, I can become. This should be man's unshakable faith in himself, because God dwells in him. Essays in Philosophy and Yoga.
Such an important statement that nothing is impossible to any of us. Whatever we see in ourselves, whatever thought suggests to us, we can do. Whatever it reveals in us, we can become. And that is because God dwells in each of us. And when God dwells in each of us, our possibilities are infinite. There is no limitation to what the soul can do. So now we'll continue just a little bit more, and these 4 lines about what arises in her. It's a thought, and this thought can conceive, but it hardly knows. And yet it arises slowly in her and creates the idea. Idea is not capitalized here, and eventually we'll have to discuss Sri Aurobindo's concept or his realization of idea, which he often calls real idea. So this arises slowly in her, and as a result, this thought creates the speech that labels more than it lights. And then he has a semicolon, and he says, a trembling gladness that is less than bliss. So it is not what we want. We want the true bliss. As Sri Aurobindo has said, it is bliss that has created the world. So this trembling gladness that thought gives us is less than bliss. And it invades from all this beauty that must die. Now, to invade means to take possession of, or to penetrate, to spread into, to permeate. It invades from all this beauty. But what is it that's invading? It's this trembling gladness that is less than bliss. So we will end there today, and Nika will read for us all the lines that we covered today.
Okay, thank you. An aspiration in the night's profound, seed of perishing body and half-lit mind, uplifts his lonely tongue of conscious fire towards an undying light forever lost. Only its hears soul echo of its call, the dim reply in man's unknowing heart, and meets not understanding why it came, or for what reason is the suffering here. God's sanction to the paradox of life and the riddle of the immortal's birth in time. Along a path of eons serpentine, in the coiled blackness of her nascent course, the earth goddess toils across the sands of time. A being is in her whom she hopes to know. A word speaks to her heart she cannot hear. A fate compels whose form she cannot see. In her unconscious orbit through the void, out of her mindless depth, she strives to rise, a perilous life, her gain a struggling joy. A thought that can conceive but hardly knows, arises slowly in her and creates the idea, the speech that labels more than it lights, a trembling gladness that is less than bliss invades from all this beauty that must die.
Thank you so much, Nika. Beautiful reading. Sanjana, would you read for us next week? Thank you.
Okay. Yes, absolutely.
Namaste all, and thank you
Namaste.
for attending.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thanks,
Namaste.